So today on the Accounting for Our Community podcast, we have Mark John Stewart.
Thanks, Brittany. Excited to be here. One of my favorite firms, SP Partners, one of my favorite topics, strategy. So really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, and thank you. So Mark is a strategist, an entrepreneur, TED Talk speaker, and the managing director of management consulting firm Wentworth Strategy Group. He serves as the chair of the board for the directors of the Bay Area Trust, is an advisor to the International Charity Empowerment Squad, and has led marketing agency Flyprint as president since its inception in 2007. Currently an instructor for strategic management with McMaster University's Master of Communication program. Mark's academic leadership experience includes serving as the president of McMaster Alumni Association and as a member of the McMaster Board of Governors. Mark holds an MBA in Strategic Market Leadership from DeGroote School of Business and has completed executive studies at Harvard Business School and the Schulich School of Business. Impressive resume you have there.
Appreciate the generous bio. Thanks, Brittany.
So today we're going to be talking about strategic management for small to medium-sized businesses. And I think there's sometimes a lot of confusion as to the difference between what strategy is versus strategic management. So would you be able to explain that?
Yeah, I think actually a definition is probably a good place for us to start off. We use that word a lot, strategy, right? What's our strategy? What's our plan? What are we going to do? We use it as an adjective, as a noun. But in the practice of strategy and consulting and academia, some of the definitions can help give us sharper clarity around what it is and how to use it effectively to achieve success. So when we're talking about strategy, one of the ways that we can look at it is setting a particular vision and then setting up an aligned set of decisions, factors, and choices that are going to help us to achieve that vision or that outcome. Right? And that's very similar to, but it's different from something like a strategic plan, where a plan is just something that you're going to do, whereas a strategy is something that is going to achieve a certain set of objectives. And that differentiation is important because when we are setting strategy, it's not just saying next year we are going to do X, Y, Z, but first we have to make sure that we're setting a target, we're setting outcomes. There's a lot of ways accounting plays into that. That is going to be defined as a win or a success for us. And the strategy is then the set of interrelated factors, and in a business that can include things like HR, operations, marketing, artificial intelligence, all the elements surrounding the path to work towards that success. Another term that we often use is strategic management. So, the act of running your enterprise, whether it's a for-profit or non-profit, in a strategic fashion. So, great word in general, strategy. I mean, something's better if it's more strategic than less strategic. But when we get into the art and science of it and using it in business and with organizations, we can get into some of the nuances that can help us craft strategies that truly help us to succeed and win as organizations.
Yeah, that's great. So can you help explain, and I know you just did in some sense, but the importance of why small to medium-sized enterprises should understand and utilize strategic management?
Absolutely. We're strategy consultants at Wentworth Strategy Group, so this is a topic that I'm excited to dive into with my clients all the time. And especially with small and medium enterprises, if the leaders or staff members don't have a lot of experience with strategy, developing strategies, strategic analysis and execution, it could be something that isn't looked at in a very formalized or structured way. Mm-hmm. And quite often that's where we get called in to provide guidance and assistance to clients in walking through strategies in a systematic fashion, making sure that we're taking advantage of best practices, great ideas, and we're executing strategy in very impactful ways. So why this is important for small and medium enterprises? Quite often, small and medium enterprises don't have as large an infrastructure as big companies. They won't necessarily have a dedicated division or experts in-house who are focused on strategy. And so it's up to a leadership team, or say with a company like SP Partners, the partners and other leaders who are going to have to come together, possibly with outside assistance, to put together the strategies that are going to help the organization win. Now, the thing about strategy is you have a set of decisions, whether you're thinking about them as strategies or not, right? When it comes to human resources, you are hiring people, and whether or not you're doing that in a very intentional way that aligns to a specific mission and vision, you're still making decisions. When it comes to operations, even things as simple as conversations we're having right now about hybrid and remote work. back to office or staying at home, those have implications for your company culture and dynamic, or your cost of doing business, the rent that you pay. So all these interrelated factors tie into your business success. We can look at different areas like marketing, for example, which is an area that we intuitively think of as very strategic. We're trying to connect our products or services to a market, so there's got to be an internal logic to that. So what am I getting at? We're always making decisions. We always have a set of factors that are impacting our business. If we're being strategic, it means we're being very intentional, we're being more methodical, we're being thoughtful, and we're thinking about how all those decisions relate to one another, and we're putting them together in a way that gives us the best chance to win. So for small and medium enterprises, this can often be a great differentiator that helps organizations go from making independent decisions that don't necessarily have a strong logical coherence, that aren't necessarily working towards a stronger common goal, into ones that are. And this is a great way for organizations to continue to grow, to thrive, and to make the biggest impact they can.
Yeah. Now, what are the implications from not having strategic management within an organization?
Absolutely. So, we can just work backwards there. So quite often, as an example, you'll hear a term like silos, organizational silos. We think of these things as bad things because we think these are different parts of an organization that don't talk to one another. So when they make decisions, they're disconnected from what other departments are doing, and yet somehow that company is supposed to come together and is supposed to be able to produce an outcome for its clients or for its market or whoever it serves that's optimal. So implications of not having a strategy or not working in a strategic fashion can mean that there's siloing, that decisions are misaligned, that organizations don't come together, they don't form relationships with one another across departments and with other stakeholders like your clients or suppliers. So it's really stepping back and being thoughtful about all the way these types of things interconnect. And the implications, if you don't, are that you're going to be misaligned, you're going to be missing opportunities, you're going to have unnecessary friction. You're just not going to be communicating through a common logic of a business in a way that produces ideal results. So, we always encourage clients to be strategic. It doesn't always mean, hiring a strategy consulting firm, but we always consider them to take time to be working on your business, not just in your business.
Yes.
To be stepping back, to be sometimes not just looking at the ground level of what you do day to day, but looking at 30,000 feet, to put some time aside in your year, in your quarter, in your month to analyze results, analyze things that have changed in a marketplace, all these ways of doing strategic analysis so that you can do more strategic and intentional execution of your business activities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about succession planning a lot in the accounting business, and so kind of tying those two together, how does strategic management relate to accounting?
Absolutely. So I'll pick up on the succession planning note, which I know SB Partners helps a lot of clients with. But for example, at some point, people are going to move on. Whether that's a retirement that's planned long in advance, or whether somebody's life circumstances changes and they just, have to leave their job in a relatively short time frame. An organization that's being more strategic is thinking about succession planning. They're thinking about other people in the organization who might be ready to assume a leadership role. They're perhaps investing in that layer of leaders so that when the opportunity does come up, there's a smooth transition and they're ready for the task. Or even doing things like employer branding. If you're building your organization in a way that's more attractive to the market, that's something that might take some effort today, but when you need to replace employees or when you're growing, if you have a more attractive employer brand, as we call it, you're much more likely to be able to attract top quality employees. So again, those are strategic decisions as opposed to just waiting till somebody leaves and then scrambling and hoping that you can find a good solution. So you asked about accounting in particular. There's actually a really strong connection between strategy and accounting. They're very correlated. There's different ways that we can assess the situation. One is qualitative, talking about the factors in general, but one is quantitative. What are the numbers? So if we look at a business or even a nonprofit or charity, accounting helps us to tell the tale of the organization and its outcomes and the results of its strategies through numbers. Right? If we don't have those numbers in a clear and organized fashion, then we're thinking in abstractions, right? We don't understand the scale of the business. We don't understand the profitability of the business. I mean, strong accounting is incredibly important. Whenever I'm working with clients, if I perceive that they don't have their accounting affairs in order, that's one of the first things that I recommend, often SB partners, to get those affairs in order. Accounting is often retroactive looking, so we're counting what happened, right? We're developing financial statements and reports from previous years. That's super important because we can analyze them, and that helps inform decisions moving forward. But accounting also offers an opportunity to be very strategic looking forward, because you can do things like what we call pro forma budgeting or forecasting, which is to say if we come up with a plan, a strategy, a direction, it's not just what the idea or directionality of that plan is or that strategy, but it's also the quantitative elements of it. If we decide to move in this direction and we're going to make this investment, what are the financial outcomes that we expect to get? Or what are the social outcomes if we're looking at a nonprofit? So accounting has a very great benefits organizational strategy by both helping to account for and assess what has happened and to empower us to analyze that, and also to look forward and to put together a strong financial framework that matches up to strategic ideas to help an organization feel as confident as possible about its path forward.
Yeah, no, everything you said makes total sense to me. Speaking of which, forecasting, budgeting, that's something that SB Partners definitely helps our clients with. So we always want to be strategic, and I think we can both concur being strategic and employing strategic management is important, but why don't organizations do this as often as we'd like to see?
That is a good question. I think there's very few organizations that we go into that don't tell us, oh, I wish I did spend more time working on my business. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. First and foremost, organizations and even us in everyday life, we're always competing between the urgent and the important. So strategic analysis, execution, planning, management, these are things we know we should do. But every time we open our email inbox in the morning, there's all kinds of fires to put out. There's urgent things. So that urgent thing keeps putting off the thing that's important, like putting time aside in our year to focus on strategy. But it's not urgent. We don't have to do it tomorrow. So I think a lot of times strategy is competing for attention with everything else that's happening in an organization. Strategy also, by definition, it's very complex. Ideally, when you're doing good strategy, you're taking into account as many factors about a situation as possible. That can involve things like taking the time to step back and do pro forma budgeting. It can involve doing market and industry analysis. Often strategy involves a degree of expertise. You can be dealing with an overwhelming set of information. And if you're not an expert in strategic facilitation or strategic analysis and execution, it can be difficult to even know how to go about figuring out which parcels of information we need to collect. How do we collect them? How much effort, how much time do you put into it? It's challenging to do strategy, right? So that's often why we get calls, or SB partners get calls to help with elements related to strategy. It's because companies say, you know what? We'd rather bring in some support that knows how to get down right to the heart of strategic planning, facilitation, execution right away. And that's what we do. We come in with a set of best practices. We have looked across a whole span of industries. We work with different clients. So we're able to pretty rapidly and quickly help our clients put strategies in place, analyze their situation, analyze their market. So yes, we encourage everybody to be as strategic as possible, but we understand that there's tensions in spending time on analysis. There's even concepts like analysis paralysis. You can study things forever, but sometimes you just got to get to it. So I think because of all these tensions, organizations aren't often as strategic as they would want to be. However, I would argue it's just like, say, taking good care of your health, right? Or doing things that are planting seeds now that are going to continue to pay dividends in the future. So the way we like to help organizations think about this balance is to look at your calendar, look at your month, look at your year, and say, we are going to put this block of time aside for work that is strategic or analytical, where we step back, where we look at our business big picture. We make sure that block is protected. We fit everything else, all the urgent stuff, into the rest of the time that's left.
Yes. And I think you made a good point there with, it's about finding those trusted advisors, working with accountants, working with strategic advisors like yourself and Wentworth Group, who can really kind of accelerate that process for you. Because if you don't have the expertise in-house, then this is going to take far longer than maybe it needs to. And I definitely am an advocate for working and building your team. So I think that's awesome. So back on communication. So how can SMEs effectively communicate and implement their strategic management plans throughout their organization?
Good question. Communications are a huge part of strategy to all of your stakeholders. So the obvious stakeholders that need to know your strategy are your employees, your team, but for example, your partners, your clients, the whole external world that engages with your business in some way. It's often useful for them to know what you're intending to do and how they fit into that puzzle as well. So, there is that trope of strategy being this kind of dusty report that sits on a shelf and you look at it again in 5 years. I would argue that's certainly ineffective strategic analysis and execution. Good strategy development comes from engaging people. Your employees within a firm who have a perspective on how your business runs, your suppliers who are working with you in a supply chain, your clients who have opinions and perspectives on your services and products. So having, even in the development of strategy, your stakeholders involved, which means rich communications, doing surveying, making sure there's open channels that your clients and team and others can reach you, making sure that the process you architect to develop a strategy is inclusive, can go a long way into ensuring that the strategies you do develop have people's voices involved, that they feel vested in them, that they feel engaged in them, they feel they have a role to play in helping your organization in the way they connect with it to achieve its mission. And then there's obviously, once a strategy's been developed, ensuring that people know about it. So it's great if your CEO and a senior leadership team know what a strategy is, but if the frontline workers and everybody else in an organization or who engage the organization doesn't understand the strategy, they're not going to be empowered in a position to execute it. So quite often when we're working with clients, we will have fairly fulsome formal strategic plans, that contain a lot of detail, quite a bit of analysis. Anybody who needs to make big decisions needs to be able to reference, deep data and to be able to make informed choices about the business, especially at the senior level. But as you cascade down the organization and you look across external stakeholders, it's quite useful to come up with ways to express your strategy in a very simple format so others can understand. Right? So things like your mission, vision, values, if they're written in a clear and comprehensible way, even your frontline workers can know those, can look at those and say, okay, this is what we're working towards. I feel motivated to be part of this mission, and the way that my manager expects me to conduct myself is according to these values. So even if they're not there worrying day to day about how all the elements of the budget match up, everybody in the organization can still find their place within the key elements of strategy. So what we do in general is take strategy, we have kind of the large form of it, the elaborate strategic plan, and then we'll divide that up and chop it up for different audiences and different formats, whether that's an email, whether that's a poster of your values when you walk into the office, whether that's a town hall meeting for your firm so that everybody can come together and people can hear from leaders one-on-one, and make sure that people understand the strategy, they feel empowered by it, they feel engaged by it, and they feel ready to help contribute to it. And that all ties back to how we opened up this conversation, those themes of alignment and consistency. You talked about what if there's not a strategy? Well then, all the workers in your organization are going to be doing different things because they don't know what the intention is that they're tying into. And if they do understand it and they are motivated by it, then they can tie into it. And all of a sudden you're much more impactful rather than being dispersed with your energy.